meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock on September 25th, I'm sorry, 5 o'clock. On September 25th, 2019. I'd like to open the meeting. If you would please stand for me to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioner Boice, you have a report? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Line of duty deaths. We'll ask for a moment of silence here in just a moment. For law enforcement officers is 89, up 2 from a week ago. Nationwide, of course, that's still way under the 184 line of duty deaths for police officers in the country for 2018. Fire up 3 to 37 nationwide. And glad to report, Mr. Chair, that the military deaths stand the same at 31. All those numbers are under last year, by the way. Consecutive months proportionately. So a moment of silence, thank you. Okay.
All right. Do we have any amendments to the agenda?
I have none.
None here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I have 2. Firstly, in the consent agenda, we're going to bring the Brookings Head Start program into 6D. And under discussion and action item 7, we will have 7B, which is the federal lands letter from AOC Susan Morgan. That's having that all. May I have a motion, please?
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Any further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boice.
Yes.
Chair Paasch.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right, next we're going to do our public comments, and I would ask you all to please limit your public comments to 3 minutes. We have quite a few this evening, and we'd like to get through everything and give everyone a fair chance to speak. So what we'll do is, I think when we get to, Julie has a timer here. When she gets to about 2.5 minutes, she'll give you a little wave, letting you know you only have about 30 seconds left. And again, I would appreciate everyone abiding by that. If we could have Gary Garman as number 1, please, sir. How are you this evening?
I'm fine, thank you. I'll just stand. I'm going to be very brief. I know that the Floras Lake issue has been contentious, and I absolutely respect everybody taking the positions that they have. I think they're doing it in good faith. And I would just ask that whatever needs to get done to finish this also be done in good faith, which I believe it will be, and keeping in mind that things change over time with agencies in particular at a state level, so we need to be aware of that, and the timeframes need to be at least reasonable and flexible if that's what's required to get it done. But I understand the positions being taken, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Kurt Hamrick. Good evening.
Good evening. Here to speak about a tool library. A little bit about my empowerment comes from the DEQ Division 83 rules. And then this is an email responding that it's a doable thing in this community. And the grant application is asking me who specifically I'm working with, and so I'll be looking for county to be signatory, city to be signatory, also letters of intent. A little bit about the time frame. The tool library will be opening in January 2021. So the planning stages will be next year, and then the actual project will be the year after that. A little bit about the climate, the West Coast climate for sustainability. Actually, what's happening is we're looking at theoretical potential and the current state of engagement for citizens for this funding. The funding comes out under reduce, reuse, and recycle grants. The grant round is open now. There's 600,000 available. They're very suggestive on the direction you might go. Also, it's here again, projected. I want to draw your attention down here. It specifically says tool libraries. The budgeting for it was intended to be 1.2 million for the whole state. Unfortunately, it's only 600,000 this year. I think it's for lack of initiative, lack of material management infrastructure. They just don't know, so they're not throwing out the whole round. One of the grant round, the focus this year is to bring a community-based organization. They also want 2 or 3. Of course, the government is involved, but referring back to the actual rules, a government is not required to be involved with this grant round. However, I prefer it. It does say any person may apply for the material management round, period. So, what is a tool library? Brief description, much material coming forward, and that's be reflected in the work task schedule here. It's only planning, the first stage. So, it's very in-depth. This is a 42-page report on how to start. So we're following the guidelines that are set forward before us. I've got it drawn out here. What we have is the tool library here, then it's filled with innovative components to make sure that it goes on. We'll be getting sustainability through the Oregon State University through interns. It brings a food waste stops with me. And that's very important right now. They're really focusing on waste equals food is what they're talking about at climate summits.
Thank you.
Question, please?
Sir? Yeah, we have a question.
Yes, sir.
Could you just give us a brief description of what a tool library is? I'm fairly
Yes.
familiar with tools, unless it's surgical tools, of course.
Now it sits acquiescent of which direction to go, but this rudimentary gardening tools. However, with what's coming forward, it can go any direction to grow.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, appreciate that.
Pauline Rancourt? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Pollyann Balch-Rancourt. I'm a citizen here in Port Orford, just outside Port Orford, and I came to speak about the Floras Lake State Parks exchange. Usually I just sit in the back and give moral support, but I felt motivated to speak tonight. It seems to me that I didn't have time to look back on the calendars, but it seems like I've been attending meetings about this subject for 5 years at least. I've gone to
Could you please sit so you're closer to the mic and that way there, I see people trying to hear you.
My apologies. I've attended OPRD meetings in Bandon and in Brookings. I've attended your commissioner meetings in Gold Beach. I attended a hearing in Langlois where 103 citizens stood up and said, please preserve our scenic and recreational and tourist values at Floras Lake. So I'm here to plead with you yet one more time to please consummate the deal that is, almost done. Please save our lake and our beautiful part of North County. And I thank you very much.
Thank you. Ann Velisis? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Ann Velisis. I'm president of the Kalmiopsis Audubon Society and a local citizen here in Port Orford. Thank you all for coming up to our little town to this time. It's good to see you here. I just wanted to thank you for moving this deal along, the Floras Lake land swap deal. As you know, a number of us went down to the OPRD commission meeting last week, and that commission voted unanimously for the swap, which I'm pleased to say. I reviewed the changes that are proposed in the current agreement, and they look good, except I'm a bit concerned about how state parks, if this will cause any sort of delay or concern. So I'd love to hear from you guys about that, if you can give any insights about where that's at, or if this will bump it back to the commission. And if you could just help us all to understand what the process is from here on out, like if you guys vote for that, will it go back to the commission? Will the state parks regard that as just within the, like the last minute things, just so we can understand what we have left to get through here?
I think Chris is here in the back, and I'll ask him to step up before we take this further to give an explanation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for your patience in working through this with all of us.
Thanks.
One last question too. You mentioned that there's going to be a federal lands letter on the agenda later on, and that was not on the previous agenda. So I'm just wondering how can things just be added onto the action item without public notice like that, or was that in the agenda ahead of time if people don't get to see it?
Yes, with in the state of Oregon, you can add stuff. So if it's something that's incidental, we'll often just amend the agenda if we can. What this was I think it was yesterday, the Association of Oregon Counties contacted us and said they want a board member appointed to a committee.
Okay.
So, to us, that's very
Yes.
incidental. So,
Got it. Okay.
that was just added. But if it was something that we felt was controversial, even if we were able to just amend the agenda and put it on, we typically hold off if we can.
Yeah.
To make sure we get public notice out and get public input
Okay.
on it.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you all.
Leila Thompson? Hi, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
Good.
I'm Leila Thompson and a native Curry County resident, and I am here to express my concern regarding the water master for our region being dissolved and what that impact would look like, and if the commission has taken time to understand who that position will impact and who will be filling the role from Grants Pass. It's a very large region from Brookings to Reedsport, I believe, over to Coquille and Myrtle Point. And I know that there is mediating between neighbors. There's a lot of things going on with water here, and there's a lot of things going on with water in Grants Pass. And I am just concerned that Curry County will be left with little representation by that position. So I just was curious if you had time to research that.
I have not yet. I don't know if anyone else on the board has.
Well, I spoke about it last meeting.
About,
Of the Water Resources Department.
oh, right.
Yes, and Port Orford's right in the middle there, between 2.5 hours to 3 from Roseburg and 2.5 to 3 to Grants Pass. So it is an issue because the rural areas tend to get smaller. The Water Resources took our water master. Coos County's not too happy either. I was in Salem at the same time. Representative David Brock-Smith and I called the Water Resources gentleman into his office, along with Caddy McEwen from the 2nd District in Coos County, and we expressed our concern what this might do to our citizens. And connected with that, ma'am, is the report that got through AOC, Association of Oregon Counties, from the director of the Oregon Water Resources for 100-year vision water for Oregon. And that is it's pretty comprehensive, as you might guess, and that's an outlook for water's going to become a bigger and bigger issue. And so what I mentioned the last meeting was, for those that have a rural system outside the municipalities, I encourage them to start now on their water rights and learn all they can. And if you have difficulty, when we talk to Mr. Pryor, the director, in Representative Brock-Smith's office, he did assure us that we will be fairly well covered. Your point, however, with the Grants Pass activity with the hemp growing, I would encourage my citizens from Port Orford to get really well acquainted with the water master in Roseburg. Gold Beach, it's a toss-up. Brookings will probably go to Grants Pass because it's 2 hours. But it is going to become a bigger and bigger issue, and I'm trying to, that's one thing I want to have to put on my commissioner's report, to notify all the citizens in the rural parts of this county, and anybody they know in Oregon that has the same situation, to take advantage and learn all they can and protect your water rights.
Okay.
It's a long process, so good for you for being aware on that.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Bob Morrow. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming up to visit us here in North County. We appreciate your making the effort to see how we live in this third of this county. Also want to thank you for Floras Lake efforts to this point. Getting the ball moved this far down the road is terrific. The 3 changes, much of what Ann spoke to, the questions she had, are mine as well. I'm a little concerned too that so many FTEs are being put into such small changes that might extend the timeline on the effort to get this finalized. I look forward to Mr. Havel's report as well to see exactly where they are and how they are considering the changes and moving forward with those. But more importantly, you know, I have great faith that that's going to go forward. But we still have 400 acres left after this deal is done. And I would encourage you to start thinking seriously about how to realize a phase 2 to get the county out of the property that has no access and no perking. We've been through all these points before. And I would suggest that phase 2 would include working with the state. I'd probably lobby Mr. Havel while he's here today. It seemed there was a positive reaction last week down at the Brookings meeting of the Parks Commission. So phase 2, 400 acres, perhaps even McVeigh Park could be part of that vision for turning all that over, getting it out of your hair and getting it to something that would in fact help the funds of the county. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Gordon Clay.
I plan to speak for 7A. I'm
Oh,
on the list.
all right.
Thank you.
Brian Thompson?
Track coach.
Cross country and track for Driftwood. Hello, commissioners. My name is Brian Thompson. Live here in Port Orford. And first of all, Mr. Boice, would like to thank you for our conversation regarding the water master locally dissolving, for lack of a better term, and being able to talk about some of those concerns, which you and I did. I think my biggest question is, can we do anything about what's, as it looks now, is happening? Is there any way local citizens can petition, contact media, any of those things, and would it have any effect that you know of? I have a hard time hearing that Salem's going to have another position, we lose ours. So that's my, I guess, a question.
Well, I would just offer that we're politely hovering to see what the long-term consequences are going to be for our citizens. And again, you bring up good points. Went to Salem. Like I said, that water master's been in Coquille for years and years, and that's a key position for, again, the 100-year vision. If you can go to the Water Resources Department or even my website, and we can get you that 100-year plan. And again, learn all you can. So to answer your question, we'll know more in 2 or 3 months maybe, and if we need to ask for additional public input to challenge this. And it's not a funding deal, except that they're trying to keep it right at 16 water masters within the state. So yeah, we lost ours.
Right. I did notice that North Coast has direct representation, but for some reason South Coast, it appears that we're going to lose it. So a bit of a concern, especially when Grants Pass, like you said, being so far away. And especially with, and I do want to mention Mr. Wacker, who is our current water master. They just recently established a live feed to the Elk River, showing some of the water flows. I know he's very active in the community, so I just want to give props to him and what he is doing, and would like to see that position in whatever means we can stay around. So thank you.
So maybe we should start now lobbying to get it back, or increased to 17. No better place than Coos and Curry County. We might have to consider that.
Can I just add a comment to that?
Yeah.
I know in Jackson County, they have additional resources because the county pays part of the water master's salary, so they were able to get that. We don't have the resources to do that, but certainly if we can figure out a way, you know, if people have ideas on how you could fund something like that, we could approach the state about that option. But we'd also have to show the need. We'd have to show that there's enough work here to justify, you know, having a water master here. And I think that's part of our challenge right now.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we're going to move to 5, which is presentations. And this will be for the consideration of State Parks Land Exchange proposal of Floras Lake. Counsel Huttl couldn't be here this evening. He is definitely under the weather. Chris, if you could come up, please. Introduce yourself, and we can open up a discussion on this.
Chair Paasch, members of the Commission, my name is Chris Havel. I'm with the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department from the Director's Office. Glad to see you again. My hair is a little spiky because it was styled by Port Orford heads earlier this afternoon. I went down on the North Cape because I haven't been down at the end of that trail for a bit, and just sort of sat there like this. So it was tremendous.
Vertical wind is wonderful there, isn't it?
I miss it, actually. I used to camp all the time at Cape Blanco and haven't been there in about 2 years. So I do want to thank you for the time and attention you've been putting into this. As you've heard from prior testimony, our commission did meet last week in Brookings and approved the transaction pending your approval. So that's not them, of course, directing you to do anything in particular. It's still completely up to you. And the negotiation on the edges of that is still open. Now, we've had some transactions back and forth, some emails with some suggestions. And the 3 that have come up are to cost share on the vacation of the roads, to mention a study of McVeigh Rock specifically, and to shorten the timeline for our investment on trails. So I'd just like to address each one of those. You know, the basis of the proposal hasn't changed. It's those acres adjacent to Floras Lake transferring to us, and our acres adjacent to 101 transferring to you, free and clear with no encumbrances. On those 3 changes, we'd be happy to cost share on vacation of the roads up to $3,000. So let's split that equally, up to $3,000 worth of work for our share for the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. Absolutely fine. Mentioning McVeigh Rock explicitly as a property to study after we close and we move into our planning process for master plans in the county, absolutely fine. You know, it's there implicitly. And if you want to call it out so that nobody loses track of that, fine. On the timeline, our original language was that within 2 years we'll start the planning process to improve trail connections between our properties in the Floras Lake Cape Blanco area and county properties. So within 2 years start that process. And then when we finish a plan that details what kind of improvements we'd like to see to signage, possibly building a new trail connection where it's needed, that investment would take up to 5 years to complete. The reason we phrased it that way is we prefer methodical, thorough, good work to necessarily fast work. So we could shorten the timeline. What that puts in danger is being able to find funding to do really good, solid work, and possibly having to narrow the scope of the final trail product. So certainly, if you'd prefer to get rid of the language that talks about, you know, within 2 years starting the planning, and then once the plan is done, take 5 years to execute, and replace that with, from the moment of closing, we've got 5 years to deliver any trail improvements, that wouldn't be our preferred route, because we, like I say, we prefer to look at cultural resources, look at natural resources, make sure that we're putting trail improvements and connections in the right places, and that takes time. We have statewide trail staff that are in very high demand, servicing the entire state, and we'd like their attention focused on this particular project. And if we rush it, we may have to sacrifice some of that quality and some of that time. A slightly longer timeline allows us to take advantage of the Oregon Coast Trail focus right now. That's covering coast-wide and looking at improvements for both through hikers and local hikers using the Oregon Coast Trail. And we see all of that sort of building toward some attention on these local parts of the trail system. And a little more time gives you the flexibility for us to line up money and time and attention to do it right. So I hope I've made that clear. That's our preference, is the original language on the timing. But if you absolutely can't see moving forward unless we change that language, we'll find a way to make it work. But just honestly, and so I'm like the world's worst negotiator on this stuff, because what I'm supposed to tell you is that no, we did it this way on purpose, and if you start changing it, we're going to walk away. We're not walking away, you know. So forgive that part, sort of laying all the cards on the table. We're here for a long-term relationship. Things like looking at calendars and time, shorter in our view is sort of lower quality. Longer, we're here for the long haul with you. We want to continue working. We're going to be working through master planning. That's also in that agreement, and there's possibility of trail improvements coming out of that too. So we're not going anywhere. And if you'd like to see that language shortened for your own reasons, we'll find a way to make it work. So,
Commissioner Boice?
You know I was going to have something to say.
What about
You know, our county council, the ones for him to miss, you know, I wish him well. And he's worked hard on this, and he's doing what lawyers do and what they're responsible to do, and I have a great appreciation for that, of course. We knew 6 months ago that we had a chance to get this done by the commission meeting in Brookings last week, and that was a blast. That was a lot of fun.
Woohoo.
Felt really fortunate to have you here. Got to meet the members, etc., and those that I didn't already know. So I've of course looked carefully at the correspondence between you and Counsel Huttl. Much appreciation. 2 words you said just a minute ago, or 3 words: long-term relationship, and that's where we are. Personally, I'd like to take some of the pressure off. 2 other words that I think are very appropriate here, and that's good faith. You know, we're not talking about. There could be a misunderstanding, and that's part of our relationship that we can deal with later. I don't want to slow this process down, and I'm very happy to hear you mention too the Pacific Coast Trail. I'm very much involved in that too, and you know, with people that need the help and the volunteer, and you know, fill in the gaps that you're all very familiar with. So you know, just I don't know how much time you want to spend on this, Chair Paasch, but I'd just like to have a consensus of the board. I don't see, this is not to disrespect Counsel Huttl in any way, shape, or form. However, I don't know why we can't just get this done on our October 2nd meeting. I mean, we're extremely close. I don't want to split hairs, and I'm just going to let them do the things that we've asked them to do, and I have full confidence. And again, if there's misunderstanding, we'll work that out. It's just.
So you're calling for a vote at the October?
Well, it's not an action item, but at least if you're subject to that approval, Mr. Chair, just have a consensus that we get it on the agenda for the 5th. And I'm sure that Mr. Havel, Mr. Huttl can work this out, and I just don't want to pressure them for, you know, the 5-year thing. They've done exactly what I outlined, what we voted on. So if we could, Mr. Chair, I just would accelerate it and be proud that we got this done.
I'm fine with getting it on the October 2nd meeting, and one of the reasons I'd like to have Counsel Huttl here to kind of explain everything, and most of it's pretty cut and dry, but I do like your idea of doing it right. I think that's important, so.
So I have a motion?
Do you need a motion on this?
If we have consensus, we'll just put it on the October 2nd agenda.
Yep.
Okay.
And to answer the earlier question that came up, would we have to take this back to our commission? I think as long as we're negotiating on elements that were already in the original proposal, rather than adding new ones, we can probably get this done just at our director's level. I will check on that. Worst case, we might have to refresh it with our commission at their November meeting in Ashland. But I'm going to say I'm 83% confident we'll be able to just run this through our director, so that when it's ready and when you're ready, you'll be able to put your signature on it. Our director will be able to do it, and we'll be done.
The only thing I didn't see on here was the McVeigh part in the language transfer as well. So.
Yeah.
That's why we only have 73% confidence.
Yeah, that's right. So now I'm going to have to be reading everything again. So thanks a lot.
Anyway, I'll also agree that we'll get it on the agenda for the 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just have one question.
Sure.
Where'd you come up with 83%?
No, I don't give away the magic
I'm a numbers
part.
person,
Yes,
so.
yeah.
I'm kidding, it's okay.
That's right. I'm happy to explain it off the record. I don't want to give away my secrets, so.
Okay.
so,
Chris,
okay.
thanks for coming here for this.
Sure, my
We
pleasure.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, sir. All right, next we have the consent agenda. And basically, I'll just read through these. The Head Start program was added to that. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that.
Yeah.
There's a slight addition into that because they needed some wrapping on some concrete that was unseen prior to. And we need to move this grant along, so we put it on the consent agenda for this evening. It would be A, is to approve the Board of Commissioners minutes from August 28th, 2019, the business meeting. B, to approve Department Specialist 2 job description for the clerk's office. C, to approve the hire order for an appraiser 1 in the assessor's office. And D, to approve the Brookings Head Start amendment to their work being done.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Do I have a second?
Second, Chair Paasch.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold,
Aye.
Vice Chair Boice,
Aye.
Chair Paasch.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously.
Next, we have discussion action items. 7A, ordinance, first reading, creation of suicide awareness and prevention council. Can we have Gordon Clay step up at this time, please?
Mr. Chair, can I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
Under Director's Report, I'm gonna have staff give a brief report on the Elk River Campground. So if some of the people that were here for the Floras Lake matter want to hear that, it's just a brief update, but I just want to make sure they're aware of that so they all don't run out of the room. I did see Ann leave, and I thought maybe she would be interested.
Okay,
Does that
thank you.
include all of our staff here? 'Cause we have,
Summer and Miranda.
okay.
Mr. Clay, you can step up, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. It's been a long time.
Yes, sir. 4 days.
Well, I've been working on this for
Oh, okay.
a long time. Please bear with me. Gordon Clay, Brookings, Oregon. I want to tell you a story. The year was 1974. I was vice president of a Kansas City advertising agency. I had a 36-square-foot home in Kansas City in the suburbs and 2 Mercedes in the drive. Life was good. I had never had the thought of suicide. Then one night something didn't click, and I was compelled, let's say driven, to check out where I suspected my wife had gone. I got to a friend's house in time to watch him from across the street take my wife upstairs to his bedroom. I was enraged. If I had had a gun, I truly believe I would have killed myself that night. Luckily, I didn't. Oh, the fact is that 45% of attempts that end up in an ER said that they made the decision just 10 minutes before they actually attempted suicide. I was one of those. Luckily, I didn't. I called my medical doctor after talking me down. He asked me to promise that I wouldn't do anything until we talked again. I agreed. About an hour and a half later, he showed up at my door with a therapist. In Kansas, it takes a minimum of 6 months to get a divorce, except if it's judged that the person is serious about harming themselves or someone else. 2 days later, I was divorced. It took me about 6 months to stabilize, and the good news is I haven't had the thought of suicide since. However, a male friend of mine who committed to walk and talk with me anytime 24/7 was the second person I credit with saving my life. The reason I'm doing this work and started the Men's Resource Center and the largest website in the world on men's issues, and to work so hard on the zeroattempts.org, is that in 1982 I got a Christmas card from his wife saying that he'd killed himself. I'm still angry about that he didn't come to me, but that's the male culture. And that's a cause that men commit 80% of the suicides. Man up. Big boys don't cry. Don't be a victim. Handle it. And in order to fill that mantra, we use lethal weapons. The facts: in 2017, 14 people in Curry County killed themselves, matching our highest number ever. National statistics from the CDC report that 25 people attempt for every successful suicide, which would be 350 Curry County citizens that year. And the number is 100 for every somebody under 18 that attempts. According to the CDC, in 2017, 47,000 people killed themselves in the U.S., 1.4 million attempted, 494,000 were treated in ERs for self-injuries, and 9.4 million seriously considered suicide. Translating that to Curry County, 23,000 people, that's 14,000 suicides, 350 attempts, and 3,150 who seriously considered killing themselves. That's 14% of Curry County population in 1 year. What this and Curry County youth, 10% of 6th, 8th, and 11th graders from the 2017 wellness survey self-identified as having attempted suicide in the 12 months before that survey. What this tells me is that we have to use every bit of input from every single stakeholder to change this scenario. We have proven technology and systems to solve much of this problem. With GPs in the ER, the first responders in our schools, and the media, with each and every citizen who lives in Curry County. Let's get a handle on this situation now and use every resource we have at our disposal and not lose another friend, neighbor, colleague, or family member to suicide. Please accept my written testimony to increase the number of voting council members to at least 23, with the option to add something like the Oregon Office of Rural Health, though I don't think that office would be involved with Curry County at this point in time. Also, the recommendation to shorten the terms of 3 categories to 1 year. There is precedence for each of these actions in one of the current county councils, and I'd appreciate the acceptance of those recommendations. Thank you,
sir.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Schmelzer?
Well, I just want to add that we also did receive some written comments. They were from Connie Hunter. They were distributed to you, and they are made part of the record. So.
Okay.
Could I speak to those?
Go ahead.
The request was to include Curry Community Health as the partner, the single partner with the board, and I would like it left up to the 23 people, everybody have an equal say. The direction was asked from, and I passed this out at the last meeting, the direction was asked to set the priority for the VA, to start processing that first. And again, I would like the council to make the decisions on what aspects that we feel, or the council, if I become a member of it, what the council determines are the issues that ought to be addressed, and have every single member of the council have an equal vote, not have one of the stakeholders have priority.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so because we're going to have 2 readings on this, I don't have to read the whole ordinance. I just need to read we needed to read the headline into the record, right?
Right, read the summary, or basically the title, the purpose,
Yeah,
I
so
would say.
basically, this is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council. It will be made up of 23 people. As Mr. Clay just said, it is established for Curry County as a Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council, and its powers and duties will be the Curry County Suicide Awareness and Prevention Council shall develop and recommend to the agencies that serve within the county and to all the public plans and tools to provide for and influence the awareness of prevention of suicide in Curry County. Duties include, but are not limited to, the study of preventing suicide, plans for the prevention of suicide, and informing agencies and the general public of resources and plans to bring awareness to suicides in the county. And I will also say, as as a former military servant, I know Mr. Clay didn't talk about it much, but basically 1 veteran an hour commits suicide in our nation. That's a huge number. And 7 veterans have committed suicide this month, I believe it is. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's this month, sitting in a parking lot of a VA hospital because they went in to get services and they couldn't. 4 of those people that kill themselves every day are actually active service members. Scary numbers. There are some things happening, and I will talk about this more in our next meeting on the 2nd, and I'll have a presentation on it. But suicide is becoming an epidemic in this country, as is the drug problems, and they may at some point be linked. But I think all we can do to prevent people from making that decision, we need to do. Commissioner Boice?
Just a side note, Mr. Clay is also a veteran, served in the Army, and again, proud to make note of that. Thank you, Gordon.
Commissioner Gold?
I just want to thank Gordon for his work in this area. I had a brother that committed suicide, so it's very close to home. Thank you.
So Commissioners, Mr. Clay did have some requests on the committee members, having them a little different than what's laid out in the ordinance. I did forward that to the board so you could see what his request was. I just want to explain why it was written the way it was. It's hard to get county staff sometimes to commit to committees, so instead of just saying, instead of just saying a lipstick member, I think I identified somebody from law enforcement and somebody from, can't remember exactly how it's broken down in there, but it is all listed out. But I tried to make sure all the areas were covered without being too specific on it, because as you know, sometimes we have a hard time finding people to fill our committees. So I wanted to make sure it was broad enough that we could cover all the areas but still be able to attract people, not make it so specific that we didn't get the people helping us that we needed.
And I would hope that North County would be very involved in this as well. There's a lot of veterans up here. There's a lot of people, families up here that have the same suicide issues as those veterans as private citizens. So I would hope that people in North County would be as involved and hopefully help lead this committee. So thank you.
Do we want to move it forward to the second reading?
I do, yes.
Okay, Commissioner Boice?
Absolutely, thank you.
Do we need a motion on that or no?
No, it's just consensus to move forward. I want to make sure we agree to it.
All right, next we have a federal lands letter, and I will read the letter. It's not very long, so bear with me. This is Federal Land Management Subcommittee of the AOC Natural Resources Policy Steering Committee, Sue Morgan. Dear County Commissioners, the Federal Lands Subcommittee will be approving the 2020 budget at a meeting scheduled for October 14th, 2019. This letter serves to notify that you need to designate a commissioner to vote on behalf of your county. Your county has paid 2019 membership dues to the Federal Land Management Subcommittee and is a member in good standing with the Board of Directors of the subcommittee as defined in the bylaws. Your county is entitled to 1 vote. To appoint the voting member, the bylaws state of Article 2, Section 3B, the member county must appoint one of its governing body members to vote on its behalf. The county makes an appointment of its voting membership by a letter signed by the majority of the governing body and delivered to the subcommittee staff when it pays its dues to the subcommittee. If the county changes its voting member, it must do so in a letter signed by the majority of the governing body and delivered to the subcommittee staff. And basically that's the letter. So we need to, at this meeting, if we can, one of us needs to be appointed as the voting member for the state or for this county. Commissioner Boice?
Do you want me to nominate myself for a 3rd year, sir? It's a very important committee and I hardly miss a meeting.
I will nominate you.
Thank you.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Roll, please.
Commissioner Gold.
Aye.
Vice Chair Boice.
I want to see how you vote.
Chair Paasch.
Yes.
Okay.
Motion carried unanimously.
All right. right, so next we have our director's report.
Okay, because of the number of people that stayed, I'd like to just talk about the Elk River campgrounds for a little bit. We don't have a presentation or anything on it. At the last meeting, I just explained that we were having a meeting coming up on it. And Economic Development has been working with Parks on some promotional things about the meeting. So I just want to, since they're here, have them come up and talk about that a little bit.
Good evening, Ms. Madsen.
Hello, Commissioners. Summer Madison, Economic Development. Just wanted to let you know the Forest Service released the news release this morning announcing we will be holding a town hall with Josh Hopkins, the County Parks Director, here in Port Orford on the 3rd of October, 5:30 to 7:30. We'll do a meet and greet for half an hour, presentation for half an hour, and then Q&A. And that is to discuss and answer questions about the Elk River recreational area and how we propose to partner with the Forest Service to help manage that resource responsibly. And so we went through Port Orford today, and Josh, I think, caught Langlois earlier today and put out the news releases and the flyers. So we're hoping that the community knows to look for those and participates. If not, there's an email address on there for feedback. And that's about it. That's it. Yeah.
So you have no excuses now. I only got one of these, but you can come and take a look. And it's at the library, right?
Right. Yep.
Let's see. Yeah, 5:30 meet and greet. You said that. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yep.
So while staff is still here, I'd also like to introduce our Economic Development Assistant who does our tourism and promotions, Miranda Pleggy, stand up. So she's the one who will be promoting the campgrounds along with all our other tourism assets. Mm-hmm. She's new, so it's good that Port Orford, I think, puts a face with the name because she's definitely already gone to town helping to promote things. And talking of staff, I just want to introduce to the community our new finance director, Shar Harvey. So, Sherilyn Harvey. So she's from this area, so it's good to have somebody from Port Orford actually on staff, along with JJ. So he's not for him, so he and Counsel Huttl aren't alone on that. So I just want to continue on with the report. Next Tuesday, or October 2nd, we have our county leadership meeting, which is when the chair meets with all the cities and ports. Port Orford has been attending those. They've been a good participant, so I want the community to know that your leadership is participating on those meetings. It's been going really good. At that meeting, we're going to talk to the leaders about the county strategic planning process. We actually have our consultant, Moss Adams, coming down to meet with the group to ask the city leaders and the port leaders for input on that county strategic plan. We're also going to be discussing with them their opinion on a housing coordinator position. Do they support a county position that would help develop housing within the county, the entire county, which would include the cities? So usually we stay out of the cities, but we're saying we believe there's a need there, and do they want us to take the lead on that? We also want to talk to them about code enforcement. Some of our cities do not have the staff to do code enforcement. We certainly don't have the money to do it either, but there is a need for it. And there's one of those things, if you don't do proper code enforcement, it does affect tourism, it does affect economic development, it does affect housing values. So in the long run, we feel it's a valid investment. So we're going to be talking with the cities and the ports to see if they would support or have an interest in partnering with the county on something like that. Other than that, I just want to update the board that we had commissioned a study with Portland State University to look at combining, or I shouldn't say combining, but looking at the fact that we have two 911 systems, basically, one in Brookings and one through the Sheriff's Department. We do have a draft report that I'm reviewing right now for edits. Brookings has already looked at that, so we'll be bringing that forward, I would think, pretty soon. But I just want to let you know we're getting really close to wrapping that up. It's in the editing stages. The county adopted a credit card policy. It's been in place for about a week. We're getting some comments on it, but we're working through some bugs. So if you hear anything negative on that, just know that we're trying to work through those comments and the bugs with any new policy. We've got some things we have to work through. Charlene has been very helpful on that. She did the first draft of it, the majority of the work on that, and it's going pretty good. I do want to just announce too that Charlene has joined the Oregon Finance Officers Association, and they have a conference and accommodations, and of course, money, like I said, is always an issue. That's a repeated theme, right, with county government. But she did receive a scholarship that would pay for the conference and the accommodations, which accounts for about $1,000. So she's able to go to that without having, much expense to the taxpayers. We're grateful about that because we're glad to be represented there and actually have our voice heard. She's been putting together a lot of questions that she has for other professionals on that. Just last thing.
Is that your phone?
My daughter's calling. Last thing we did talk about ID badges for employees, especially when we have code enforcement or people going out in the field, appraisers, etc. So people know who they are. We did have one instance where, I'm sure it has happened more than once, but one recent instance where somebody showed up on the property, introduced themselves as a county employee. They were not a county employee. The owner had the common sense to call us and ask, why would you be asking me these questions? What are you doing out here? So we really thought it was important to start getting the ID badges for everyone. This was actually a suggestion from an employee in our clerk's office. At the current time, we're gonna work with the Sheriff's Department. They just got a new card reader and they have offered to do them for us. They do them for their employees, but they also do them for people that need concealed carry or gun cards. So this is just an example of what it would look like. If you wanna see a close-up of it, I've got it. But we're gonna give that a trial run, working with the Sheriff's Department to hopefully alleviate some of those issues and concerns in the public. That's all I have for you.
All right, Commissioner Gold, Commissioner reports.
Okay, I'll make this short, sweet, and to the point. I'm working with SWAC, and they are putting forth seminars for the public and some really interesting things. 20 people attended last week and 21 the week before, so we're getting quite a bit of interest there. I'm also the liaison for education in the county, and so I am getting together meetings between the school districts. First meeting is going to be with the high school principals, and we're going to be looking at what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, how can we improve the education process for the kids. And then I'm going to be getting together with the elementary principals. I've already talked to the principal down in Brookings, just happened to meet her in the grocery store, and she's real excited about the opportunity. In fact, they have the biggest elementary school, I believe, in the state. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
All right, I'm next, and then guess what? You get to close the show. So
hand me the baton, big guy.
One of the things I wanted to talk about when I first started here, I think I asked Ms. Schmelzer to look at our payroll system. I listened to our Sheriff's Department talk about the compression issues that they face with the way that our payroll system is in this county, and I for lack of a better term, I call it archaic. Some of the steps that we have and the ways that we have to give people raises, it causes a lot of problems in our system. So I would like, I've spoken to, looking into this and trying to move forward with a better way to do it that is maybe more effective and less expensive to the county. So I would just like to see, where we can go with this. I think you and I have spoken about it a couple of times, but I would like to try and move forward with some kind of a plan, or at least bring the board some different ways, approaches that we can do our payroll, so that we can possibly save the county money and do it much more efficiently, and have a little bit more control over it, as far as causing problems for different departments, like I said, with our Sheriff's Department and all the compression issues that he faced this year.
Okay, so we are looking at a wage study right now that will help address some of that, and I know once before the board we talked about the whole payroll process. Is that Is that what you're
Yes.
referring to? The process, okay.
The whole way we do it. Something else, as many of you may know, I've been looking into special districts in the county, and I just want to make everyone aware that we are going to look into all the districts in the county and see how they are currently in use in the county, if they're doing the, as best served. Is the amount of tax base that they get appropriate for that? And it's up to you, the voters, to change that. If we come up with some things that we see that are amiss, and this board agrees with it, we'll bring it to the voters in the county and let them decide how they want to deal with it. But there are some issues, and I'm not going to be explicit in this meeting, but there are some issues that I see in the county from a business sense that we've got some dollars that could be better spent from some of these special districts that are not. Some of the money isn't even staying in Curry County. Our tax dollars are going to another county to develop a campus there. So just things that we're looking into. Another thing that we're looking into, I've spoken with County Counsel. I've spoken with Ms. Schmelzer, Jim Colin from our Assessor's Office, Becky Crockett down in Planning about an amnesty program for the county on helping to get the properties in this county current on the tax rolls. As you may have heard Mr. Colin testify over the summer about properties that were originally filed as a building permit for a garage or a pole building that are now three-bedroom homes in the county. And we had an incident the other day of a very nice large home being put on the market for sale for 7 figures, and no one even knew it was there. No building permit, no planning, no nothing on this property. So we're looking at possibly doing an amnesty program, bringing to the board for approval, an amnesty program that we can ask people to come in and they will not be penalized for anything that they've done on their property without a permit. They will be asked to get the permit in place and get the property up to date. And then there may be an inspection of the property if there's electric or sewer on it. But at least it gives the homeowners and property owners a chance to get their properties up to date rather than face penalties and whatever else that may come of that. Lastly, I would just like to thank Port Orford for opening your building up to us, offering us this wonderful place to do the meeting, and this really cool pen that you gave me to borrow. I love this guy. I might even take him home with me. But thanks a lot for doing that for us, and we appreciate everyone coming here. So, Commissioner Boice, it's on you.
Port Orford City Administrator Terry Richard, would you stand up, please? Yeah. Thanks. I'm just going to add on to what Chair Paasch said there for making this available. This is our second time here. This is something that we've been determined to do and offer, and the turnout's good. But that's not a requirement, but it is appreciated. And two, thank you for sitting in on our meeting, Terry. So a couple things here on the October 8th. And I do have extra of these if anybody needs one. It's the fire preamble for communities. You know what happened in 2 out of the last 3 years. Port Orford is at high risk for fire, just like any community in Southwest Oregon. The more we know, the more we can reduce those odds. That's not just fire-wise around your neighborhoods and your homes, but I think you're going to find some really good information here. Try and spread the word if you possibly could. Port Orford Library on October 10th. And then we have Emergency Management Expo. I got several of these. That's October 12th in Gold Beach at the fairgrounds. Our new director there, he replaced a really good guy in Don Kendall, and he's one of the busiest people in our program, along with Summer Madison and our economic development. They work lots of hours. Also, here is a one-page summary from John Wilson, the Oregon Department of Aviation. It's also connected with our emergency management for the North County Cape Blanco Airport. And we're pretty excited about this. It looks like the logical thing for that airport would be to take advantage of, my goodness, it was built by the Navy back just pre-World War II, and it is just some kind of healthy and stout. Commissioner Paasch has also been working on this. But if you're interested in this one-page summary, what the state outlook is in conjunction with the county and our emergency management program, it's one of the three most active and largest airports on the coast that are not commercial. And so it would, this airport, in a worst case scenario, especially because of its elevation and because of its, the way it was constructed, it would basically serve from Reedsport all the way possibly little town of Klamath south of Crescent City. So I printed several of these out. Just the attention we're getting from the Oregon Department of Aviation on why this would make logical sense and how we could properly prepare. I won't spend any more time on it, but these are available, and keep your ear to the track. I think some real good things could happen there, and we're really tuned into that. The boards and committees that I serve on and how this affects North County, not just North County, but in particular, I'll talk about several of these aspects that I'm very active in. Number one is the Governor's Fire Recovery Council. Their next meeting is in Portland, and that is tomorrow. So I'm going to be calling in for that meeting, and it's an important meeting. There's about 35 people there from all over the state. I'm very honored to be able to serve. We're going to be giving a presentation, myself and Gold Beach Fire Chief, Tyson Krieger. This is a vision that he had and has been working on for the last 4 years, and it's a Rogue Siskiyou Regional Fire and Emergency Training Center. We've already got 140,000, give or take, in grants, either grants or pledges. So we've had a lot of help on this. We're about completed with phase one. So all of our documentation has been sent into the Fire Council, and we'll be by phone, Chief Krieger and myself, and we'll be talking about why we think that is appropriate. And the bottom line for all of the western United States, we are very short of firefighters, and our primary focus is and are the hotshot crews. And one example I can give you real quick, I'll probably give this example tomorrow, but our new Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest Supervisor, Merv George, I've been able to get very well acquainted with him the last year and a half, and watch the people that he's brought in to our region, and I think he's just doing an incredible job. And when he was the supervisor for the Six Rivers National Forest in just south of the Klamath border, or excuse me, the Oregon border in the Klamath River area, Oregon-California border, he had 3 hotshot crews for 1 million acres. That's how big that forest is. Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest is 2 million, and he has 1 hotshot crew. So that's where we're going to really, hopefully, be able to get help and bring more firefighters, and especially with the terrain that we have here, the difficulty in fighting these fires. We don't get them out in the first 10 days. Chances are not good that we can. Association of Oregon Counties, I'm on that board, and I try not to miss a meeting. Once in a while I call in, just in the interest of time and saving travel, but that's how I found out about the water resources issue and the water master. I was able to get a report from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, which, by the way, a week ago Friday, they were also here for their monthly meeting, and I had the privilege of welcoming them as well. But that's how we got really well acquainted with the Water Master Director, Tom Pryor. Curry Community Health, we spent 2 hours on that today with issues that are very important to the county as far as public health and I want to say almost their need to do away with that part and give that back to the county. So we're looking at some different options there. We spent also during that 2-hour period today with the Oregon Health Authority, and we also had a representative, retired CAUS Health and Wellness Director, who has been very successful, and she was able to contribute a lot to our meeting as well. Wild Rivers Coast Forest Collaborative, we met just last week, and we're working with the Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative, and they have been very successful in getting funding for hazard fuel reduction. Of course, I tie that in with SOD, sudden oak death. Many of you have heard me say, this is just my opinion, but housing and sudden oak death are the 2 biggest issues facing this county. And so if we keep working and progressing through the collaborative with Forest Service officials, retired foresters, there's a Klamath Wild representative that surprisingly I get along with fairly good, and we're just continually lobbying one another all the time for what is the best thing for the citizens of Curry County and to rebuild our forest back and save what we have left. And there's a lot of good determination, a lot of wonderful people that are involved in that. So I'll give you a report down the road on the success in finding that funding. As you know, sod, oak trees have to be cut down and burned. That's the really essentially the only treatment, and that is very, very labor intensive, but it's within the quarantine zone. We're determined to keep this disease in Curry County. It's mainly on the half of the north-south region that's closest to the ocean, but it does affect fir trees, and that is a different strain. I won't give you a lot of detail on that now, but I attended another meeting last night in Pistol River because it is concentrated in that area and, of course, Cape Ferrolo, Carpenterville. So we have to keep a very close eye on this. Travel Southern Oregon Coast, we mentioned we just had almost a half-day meeting in Gold Beach last Thursday, I think it was, and we talked about the Pacific Coast Trail. Visitor promotion in this part of Curry County, and boy, I can promise you, Port Orford is not left out of that. And I'm very happy to report that. Advanced healthcare, I'm going to call into that meeting after I'm done tomorrow with the Governor's Fire Recovery Council. And the Curry County Housing Task Force. I think we've talked a lot about that. Our number one goal right now is to see if we can fund outside the general fund through grants, maybe for a 3-year period, a housing coordinator. And that will probably be a person as well that has grant writing capacity and experience, and we're making some progress. That's moving slow, but it would definitely measurable progress, Mr. Chair. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, with nothing further, this meeting is adjourned.
You passed up that big gavel then? Yeah.